What could possibly cause a captain to reject a takeoff after rotation when the aircraft is already airborne and functioning perfectly? And what would happen if he did? As always, it's a complex and fascinating question. And as we'll soon find out, things aren't always what they seem. Stay tuned. On the morning of March 12, 2014, a 61-year-old captain woke up feeling great. Just a day before, he had received encouraging news from his cardiologist. After undergoing a bypass operation in 2011, his medical certificate had been issued with certain limitations. But now, he was optimistic that his medical would be extended for at least another year. He loved flying and had no plans to retire early. With an incredible 23,800 hours of total flight time, 4,500 of those on the Airbus A320, he was both experienced and confident. At the time, he flew for U.S. Airways. March 12th was his last day off before his duty schedule resumed, so he spent the day relaxing before going to bed early to prepare for the red-eye flight ahead. On March 13th, he woke at 4:45 a.m. feeling rested. After getting into uniform, he drove to his home airport in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and caught a jump seat ride to Charlotte, North Carolina, where his duty would begin. The flight was on time, and he even managed a 90-minute nap on the way. By the time he officially signed in at 9:30, he felt sharp and ready for the day. There, he met the first officer who would be flying with him. She was 62, based in Charlotte, and had also been off the previous 3 days. She had gotten up at 8 a.m. that morning, meaning she, too, felt well-rested and prepared. She brought 13,000 flight hours to the table, including 4,700 on the A320. This was a seasoned, alert, and well-rested crew with clean training records, completely ordinary in the best sense of the word, which is exactly why what happened next is so striking. It could have happened to anyone. After meeting the cabin crew and reviewing the pre-flight documents for the day's 3 legs, they got ready. The first flight was from Charlotte to Tampa, then to Philadelphia, and finally to Fort Lauderdale, home for the captain. Weather conditions were normal, aside from some gusty winds expected later in Philadelphia. With everything in order, the crew began their day. We don't know for certain who was pilot flying and pilot monitoring on the first 2 legs, but we do know they went smoothly, and the aircraft arrived on time in Philadelphia at 16:49. That's when they learned they would need to switch aircraft for the final leg to Fort Lauderdale. Aircraft swaps can be a hassle. The old aircraft must be shut down, catering cart sealed, and the new aircraft fully configured from scratch, not just turn around. On top of that, the crew had to relocate physically. With a scheduled departure at 17:50, they had about 1 hour, tight but manageable. Because of the windy conditions, the captain was designated pilot flying for final leg. He stopped at the gate to coordinate with the dispatcher, while the first officer headed to the cockpit to start programming the flight management computer, FMC, following U.S. Airways procedures. Their new aircraft was a 15-year-old Airbus A320 with no known technical issues. But to understand what would happen next, we need to talk briefly about a few important systems. First up, flex temperature takeoff thrust. Modern airliners like the A320 have engines powerful enough to handle worst-case scenarios, high-altitude airports, heavy weights, high obstacles. But that extra power isn't always needed. Using it unnecessarily adds wear, burns more fuel, and increases noise. To avoid this, pilots often use a derated thrust setting, telling the engines to use less than full power during takeoff. On the A320, this is done by entering a flex temperature into the FMC, which tricks the engine into thinking it's hotter outside, so it delivers less thrust. However, this flex temperature must be recalculated and re-entered any time there's a change in takeoff conditions, like a new runway intersection or aircraft. The same goes for V-speeds V1, VR, V2, which are also performance dependent. U.S. Airways crews receive performance data directly from dispatch, which they would then input and confirm. To actually activate flex thrust, the pilot must move the thrust levers into the flex/MCT detent. On the A320, the levers have 5 detents: idle, climb, CL, flex/MCT, used for flex takeoffs and max continuous thrust; toga, maximum thrust for takeoff or go around. Reverse when pulled back beyond idle. Without a valid flex temp input and the lever set to flex/MCT, a flex takeoff won't be performed. Next, let's talk about the ECM system, Electronic Centralized Aircraft Monitoring. This is the A320's core system for displaying engine and aircraft status, alerts, and malfunctions. ECA messages are color-coded. Red, immediate action required. Amber, attention required, no immediate action. Green, informational. Amber warnings are further divided. Level 1, visual alert only. Level 2, visual alert plus an amber master caution and an oral chime. Chime. This kind of warning will soon become key to our story. And then there's a retard call-out, the notoriously blunt alert heard during landing flare. Retard. Retard. This cue tells the pilot to bring the thrust levers to idle. But what most don't know is that this call-out can also be triggered in a very obscure situation. One we'll get shortly. And speaking of obscure, did you know your personal